Ever get that feel? Like a show or a book you love, it's like they're just, I don't know, betraying it somehow.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
That's what we're diving into today. Rings of Power, Season 2. Fans are fired up.
Yeah.
Not always in a good way either. And we're not here to review the show itself. We're going deeper, right?
Right.
Why are people having such strong reactions to this?
Yeah, it's fascinating.
So to help us understand, we've got two pretty vocal voices in the fandom, I would say. We've got the critical drinker,
Oh, yeah.
who's known for his, well, passionate takes, let's say.
Passionate, yeah.
And Asmongold, who's, a streamer, and he's not afraid to just tell you what he thinks.
No filter. No filter.
And the critical drinker, he does not hold back. He calls this season ARS cancer
Yeah.
an abomination. I mean, a blight on humanity, even. That's some strong language. It's more than just, this show wasn't for me, right?
It really is. You're right. It goes way beyond that. And it's interesting because what you're seeing here is this real sense of personal betrayal that some fans feel.
Right.
Because they're so connected to Tolkien that it's not just that they think the show is bad. They feel like it's actually damaging something precious to them.
Right, and it's that language, like ARS cancer. You're suggesting something is actively harmful.
Exactly.
Corrupting, almost.
Yes. And that taps into this fear, right, that fans have. When something you love gets adapted, is it going to be changed in a way that's true to the original? And there's that anxiety that it's going to be changed to be more modern, which somehow means it's diluting the spirit of the original.
Well, and what's interesting is both the critical drinker and Asmongold, they seem to have some common ground here, right?
Yeah.
They both have issues with the pacing, with some of the dialogue, with some of the characters. But there's one phrase that they both use, and it really jumps out. Forced diversity.
Oh, yeah.
What do you make of that?
Forced diversity.
Yeah.
It's such a tricky term because on the one hand, you want to see more representation in the things you love.
Right.
You want to feel seen. But it have to be done in a way that feels, organic and not like someone's just checking boxes.
And specifically, the critical drinker says at one point that the diversity feels so forced, so unnatural, and he specifically mentions a specific scene character the critical drinker mentions. And it gets to that feeling of, if you're trying to be representative, it has to feel like it belongs.
Right. And that's especially tricky with Tolkien because the source material itself is not very diverse.
Right.
So it's like, where do you even begin to add that in without it feeling like it came out of nowhere?
So how do you strike that balance then? How do you stay true to what was there while also maybe making room for new perspectives, new interpretations? Because it feels like that's part of what's driving these really strong reactions, that it's someone else's interpretation being put on a story that they feel connected to.
It's that sense of ownership, right? Especially for fans that have lived in Tolkien's world for years, maybe even decades. They feel like they know this world.
Right.
And so when something changes, it's not just, oh, they changed something. It's this feeling of, you're changing something that I feel like I'm a part of.
Yeah. It's like when someone tells you a story and they get a key detail wrong. And you're like, no, that's not how it goes.
Exactly. And this is that, but on a grand scale. It's like fans are wrestling with, what does it even mean to be faithful to the source material? Does that mean keeping every single detail exactly the same? Or is it more about capturing the essence, even if that means it evolves?
Okay. So we've talked about this feeling of betrayal, right? These anxieties about change. But let's get a little specific here. Because both the critical drinker and Asmongold, they take issue with some of the specific choices that were made. And nothing more than, I think, the orc family we see in Season 2. So yeah, we're really digging into these fan reactions to Rings of Power Season 2. And well, there's one scene that really seems to have set people off.
Yeah.
That orc family.
Yeah, that was a bold choice, to say the least.
To put it mildly, I mean, Asmongold, when he saw that on his stream, he was not happy.
Yeah.
Called it complete garbage. Even questioned if the writers had even read Tolkien.
Yeah, it's interesting because to understand that reaction, we have to think about how orcs are portrayed in the books.
Right.
I mean, they're pretty much pure evil.
Yeah, like those monsters and fairy tales, right?
Yeah.
You don't think about them having families and feelings. They're just there to be defeated.
Exactly. So when the show tries to humanize them, give them this whole backstory, it really challenges how we traditionally think about Tolkien's orcs.
And for some fans, it's just going too far.
Yeah,
like
right.
it's messing with the core of what makes an orc an orc. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Because Tolkien's orcs were always so terrifying because they were unknowable,
Right.
pure evil.
Yeah, and this gets to a big question about adapting anything, really?
Okay.
I mean, is the goal to just recreate everything exactly as it was?
Right.
Or is there room for the creators to reinterpret, explore themes in a way that speaks to a modern audience?
It's interesting you say that because the critical drinker, when he talks about this orc family, he says it sucks the danger right out of them, which makes me think about how important that sense of danger, good versus evil, really is to a lot of fantasy fans.
Absolutely. And, Tolkien in particular, his work has this very strong moral center, right? It's
Yeah.
very much about the battle between good and evil, light and darkness.
Hmm.
And when you start to humanize the orcs like this, for some fans, it's like you're muddying the water. Suddenly the lines aren't so clear.
Right, which makes you wonder, can you really dig into the complexities of the bad guy without kind of messing with what the story's really about?
That's the thing. It's a balance.
Yeah.
And it's something every adaptation has to figure out. How much do you stick to the original, and how much do you reimagine it for a new audience? And there's no easy answer.
Yeah, because even though I was shocked at first, I mean, seeing that orc father dreading going to war, it did make me think about things a bit differently, I have to admit.
And, I think that's the interesting thing about these really strong reactions from fans. They can tell us a lot about what we value in a story and how we approach adaptations.
And this idea of staying true to the source material, it makes me think about when Asmongold was talking about Tolkien's virtue.
Yes,
Almost like he feels like the show itself is missing something, morally speaking. Well, it's missing that thing that he sees as essential to Tolkien. So this whole virtue thing, I mean, that's kind of a loaded term these days, isn't it?
oh, it's a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's something Asmongold keep coming back to. When he says the showrunners don't understand Tolkien's virtue, it's like he's saying the show is missing that moral compass,
Mm.
that clear sense of right and wrong you get from the books.
Right, like it's reflecting a more modern sensibility, which is maybe a little more ambiguous.
Exactly.
And that's got to be jarring for fans who see Tolkien's worldview as part of what they love.
It really is, because it becomes less about whether you liked a scene and more about the whole feel of it. Like, how does this adaptation measure up to the values of the source material?
Which I guess makes you wonder, is that even possible? I mean, we're talking about books written ages ago for a totally different audience. Can you capture that essence of Tolkien's virtue, whatever that means, without it feeling, I don't know, old-fashioned?
It's the question, right? How do you stay true to the original but make it work for today? Because the world's changed since Tolkien's time. What spoke to people then might not land the same way now.
Yeah, even the stuff that made Tolkien groundbreaking, the epic scale, the whole good versus evil, to some viewers today, that might seem simplistic.
Exactly. So you're always walking this tightrope, trying to honor the original, but letting it breathe in a new context.
So where does that leave Rings of Power then? It's obviously gotten people talking, whether they love it or hate it. What does that say about Tolkien all these years later?
I think it proves how much his world still captures the imagination. Even the people who are super critical, they're coming from a place of love for that world.
Yeah, it's like everyone's got their own version of Middle-earth in their head.
Right.
And when it doesn't match up, it's almost personal.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And honestly, that passion, even the negative stuff, it shows how powerful Tolkien's stories still are.
It's been really interesting digging into this with you. Clearly, Rings of Power, it's more than just a TV show at this point.
Right.
It's making people think about adaptation, about fandom, about what it even means to be faithful to something.
And that's what's exciting, right? It's not about who's right or wrong, but that we're having these conversations at all, that these stories spark that kind of passion.
Absolutely. And to anyone listening who's gotten caught up in Rings of Power, think about what worked for you, what challenged you, what does your Middle Earth look like? Because that's the magic of it. These stories, they live on in our heads long after we've finished the book or the episode. So keep exploring, keep that conversation going. And until next time, happy diving.